respected dignitaries, eminent panelists, parents, teachers, students of Xavier Institute of Management and Entrepreneurship, Xavier Leadership Center, and various management and engineering institutes across India and abroad, personalities from the media, distinguished persons from the general public, a warm good afternoon, good evening from SIME Kochi. We have right now people joining us for the webinar, which we have hosted by SIME Kochi. We have more than 500 participants in this webinar on national education policy as of now. Once again, a big thank you from XIME Kochi for joining with us today evening. Today, as we have gathered here to listen to the multidimensional aspects of the National Education Policy 2020, which would lay the foundation of a new India of 21st century, we have a galaxy of intellectuals as panelists with us. First, we have Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan, sir, former Ambassador of India, former Vice Chairman, Kerala Higher Education Council, and Director General, Kerala International Center. We have Professor J. Philip, Principal Founder, XIME, former Chairman, SIME Bangalore, and former Director, IIM Bangalore. Dr. K. Jayakumar, IAS, former Chief Secretary of Kerala, former Vice Chancellor, Tunja Thirthachan, Malayalam University. Dr. Kunjuriya P. Isaac, Founder, Vice Chancellor, APJ Abdul Kalam Technological University. Dr. Faisal Ghafoor, President, Kerala Muslim Educational Society. And to steer this eminent panel, we have yet another prominent, well-known person, SIME Kochi Chairman and former Chief Secretary and Cabinet Minister of Government of Karnataka, Dr. J. Alexander IAS. Without taking much time, may I invite Dr. J. Alexander sir, who is the moderator of this eminent panel, which is discussing on the National Education Policy 2020, to take on the baton and steer the panel. Over to you, Alexander sir.
Thank you, Ranjana. Dear panelists and distinguished guests, we from the XIME Society have decided to organize this webinar on this topic, New Educational Policy 2020, which is being talked about at different levels in the country by all stakeholders. The New Education Policy 2020 augurs a new era in the Indian education scene, an outstanding vision statement and a very inspiring policy document. Both these are meant to create a change in the perception and in the objectives of education and a change in the focus. We have seen that for the first time, emphasis placed on the development of the child, realizing child is father of the man, realizing that the brain development takes place at a very early age in the child, and then it goes on to all aspects of education in our country, with a view to transforming the system in such a manner that we will be able to make use of the manpower for human development and total improvement of the society. The focus on many of these areas, particularly I have seen there is an emphasis on the need for change in the pattern of teaching, change in the approach to education, and also a passion for excellence. A pursuit of excellence is meant to be one of the objectives of this scheme. And we are sure that the new policy, if implemented properly, with the interest of all the stakeholders, it should make a great, welcome, revolutionary change in the educational system in our country. Dear friends, we have today for the discussion very eminent panelists. The first speaker will be Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan. Briefly, Ranjana has introduced him, but I would like to introduce him a little more details. I have known Mr. T.P. Srinivasan from our student days. I have seen a spark in him even as a young student in the University College Trivandrum, and that spark has not died till today. He has had a very distinguished career in the Indian Foreign Service, served as ambassador of India to several countries, and he had a very long stint as India's permanent representative in the United Nations. In all these assignments, he has made his presence felt by the commitment to the duty that he was given to, and also the interest in general welfare of people. After retirement, he has been working from Trivandrum, engaged in many of the intellectual activities in and around Trivandrum. He had an opportunity to be the chairman of the Higher Education Council. And from that capacity, he was able to guide and mentor many of the education institutions in our country. So T.P. Srinivasan brings to this discussion his vast experience in the field of education, in the field of public administration, and in the field of diplomacy. Welcome, Mr. Srinivasan, Ambassador Srinivasan.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander.
We have with
Thank
us
you very much for it.
Another retired civil servant, Mr. Jay Kumar. He was retired Chief Secretary of Kerala. He has also experience in functioning as an education administrator, as Vice Chancellor of Malayalam University. When I think of Jay Kumar, a good friend of mine, I think about a different aspect of his personality. He is a poet, and we all know that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. As a poet, he has brought the capacity of imagination into whatever he did. When I think of that, there is a very famous and very popular song, Chandaneleba Sugandham Chudiyadaru Katu Kaminiyu. I think all the people who understand Malayalam will remember this beautiful. Whenever I think of Jay Kumar, it is this song which comes to my mind. He brings the sugandham, the fragrance of a poetic imagination into whatever he does. Welcome, my friend Jay Kumar. We have with us Dr. Isaac Pincheria. A distinguished career as an engineer, as a teacher of engineering, and as an administrator. He was the secretary of All India Council of Technical Education, AICTE, which is controlling all the technical institutions and management education institutions in the country. And after that, he was the first Vice Chancellor of the Kerala Technical University. And then he had an opportunity to serve as Vice Chancellor of a private university in Tamil Nadu, the Hindustan University. Now, I am very happy to inform you that he has joined the Exayami Society as Director General of all the 3 units of Exayami Society. He will be guiding the academic activities of all the 3. Welcome, Dr. Abdesik.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have great pleasure in introducing Dr. Faisal Ghafoor, a remarkable person with a wonderful experience. He is a medical practitioner, he is a neurologist, and he teaches neurology in a medical college owned by the society which he is presiding, the Muslim Education Society. This society in Kerala runs more than 150 education institutions, a medical college, 5 engineering colleges, and more than 30 degree colleges, and a large number of schools. And this institution, a rare institution in Kerala, was founded by his great father, Abdul Ghafoor, years ago. And Dr. Ghafoor has taken from his father and continued that legacy. This is a wonderful institution which is now concentrating on education of girls. These are the institutions where you have more than 50% of students who are girls. I congratulate Dr. Ghafoor for the wonderful work he's doing, and thank you for attending this seminar at our invitation.
Thank you, sir.
We have as the last speaker, Professor J. Philip, who is with us. Though he is the last speaker, he is the person who initiated this idea. And I think all of us present here as the panel know him very well. He is a person who is now in the midst of celebration of 60 years of experience as a teacher of management. So all over the country, he is being recognized and honored as a management guru. There are not many people in the world today who can claim to have a continuous exposure of teaching management for 60 years and continuing to do that. And he is 84 years with the passion of a 24-year-old youth and the commitment of a lifetime. As they say, age has not withered his passion, nor custom staled his commitment. So, Philip, I welcome you to this panel. Dear friends, I think you are looking forward to a wonderful experience of listening to these panelists who have all different areas of experience, but all of them are interested in the field of education, which is an instrument of social development and economic progress. Thank you. I would invite Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan to speak first.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander, Professor Philip, and other distinguished panelists and friends. I must begin by saying that I have a very positive approach to the new education policy, basically because it fits into the kind of vision that I tried to bring about in higher education in Kerala. In fact, many of the proposals that we had put forward at that time have been reflected in one way or the other in the policy paper. So I'm particularly in favor of the approach that the education policy has adopted. What it tries to do is to meet the challenges in education in the 21st century. As far as India is concerned, what are the main challenges of our education system? First is the most celebrated demographic dividend we talk about. But to attain the demographic dividend and to meet the opportunities of that situation requires a thorough overhaul of education system. And that is what is being attempted here. And the revolutionary changes that we have asked the rocket scientists to do, because educationists could not go that far. So we had to get a rocket scientist to get this kind of a vision of complete changes, a framework for sweeping changes in order to increase the quality, access, equity, excellence, and employment opportunities for the new 21st century. I will not go into specific recommendations, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. But what it attains to do is to establish a liberal, choice-based, career-oriented, and skill-based education. All these are very important aspects. But the most important thing is to remove the shackles on education. The way we have been functioning so far in silos of various educational branches, and bring this to an integrated kind of interdisciplinary exercise, with every institution becoming an interdisciplinary institution without any barriers between one kind of education and the other. It opens out the possibility for the students to learn what they would like to learn, and also at a pace at which they can learn at every stage. It doesn't put too much emphasis on a systematic and continuous process of education that we are familiar with. There are options to change in between. There are even options to drop out and go out into some other kind of education if what you have chosen does not happen to be right. So these are the main features of the system that is being introduced by this new policy. What are the main concerns that they had when they approached it? If you can list them, I would say one is employability was a major consideration. Second was stressful examination. One way or the other, our examination system has been very stressful right from the beginning, from primary education to higher education. And the examination system itself is outdated because it is still based on essay writing rather than on solution of problems. The other point that they addressed was insularity in education. Somebody takes physics, chemistry, biology, and somebody takes history, politics, and economics. And there was no possibility of any kind of mixing of these as it happens in other countries. The other thing they addressed was language policy. There is considerable confusion about language policy. Kerala, of course, it is quite chaotic. And in other states also, there have been problems of where the language policy should be. And they have obviously opted for the 3-language formula, in spite of the problems that they might bring about in Tamil Nadu. Then excess of regulation. We have too many regulatory bodies, not promotional bodies in the education system. So an attempt is being made to reduce regulatory systems and have a unified kind of a system which would integrate all these aspects. Of course, we are still to know how exactly it would be structured. But the idea is to have a unified structure with all the other bodies working under it in a homogeneous manner. Then the opportunities to be given to dropouts, because there are very many historic and legendary dropouts in the world who have done better than those who have graduated. So here there is an effort to make the students who drop out to pursue their interests in a legitimate manner without losing the credits that they may have acquired in the early stages of education. So this 4-year-old course is really very imaginatively and innovatively done. You could leave after 1 year with a certificate. You could leave after 2 years with a diploma, 3 years after a degree, and then 4 years you can go straight into PhD and others without having to go through MPhil, which is being abolished. Then improving grades. Now there is no opportunity for somebody or a student to improve his grades once he has got them. He cannot take the examinations again to improve grades, and that is also being introduced. And on funding, it is very clear that you need more money, but even the 6% of the GDP is not going to improve matters. The investment required is considerable, and therefore they are thinking in terms of private investment as a policy and the private sector. And the last is internationalization in the sense of foreign universities, how much you can cooperate, and also if foreign universities, of course, they're thinking only about the first 100, the best universities in the world, to come to India to share their experience. Of course, this is still to be passed by the Parliament. So these, I see, are the 5 or 6 areas in which they focused, and the effort is to find solutions for each of these. And they have definitely succeeded in this. But the question is of implementation. Even the best program, of course, the earlier education plans were not effective. It was because of the various considerations that take place in different parts of the country, particularly because education is in the concurrent list. Considerable adaptation will have to be made. And from my experience, having tried many of these ideas between 2011 and 2016, I think the biggest resistance will come from Kerala, which is not at all willing to accept any new changes in the system because they believe that the system is running, why not? It can continue, why disrupt it? So that is going to be a difficult issue here. In my view, we can implement this policy with considerable changes, adaptations, acceptance, changes, etc. Only if there is a consensus on 4 issues for which we have no consensus. First is the objective of education. Each educationist has his own view of what the objective of education is. Starts from Swami Vivekananda's idea of, improving mankind, and we are all educated, but we have to only enlighten them, and the education has to come from within. To the latest thinking that employability, recruitability is the main factor. So there is a huge variation in this. I have adopted as my objective of education is what Sri Narayana Guru said, that education must address the head, the heart, and the hands. And this is exactly what this is doing, but I do not think that it will have immediate acceptance in many sections of our society. Second is the language issue. Again, there is no consensus. We have English medium education in schools, and after getting educated in school, they come to the college, and then they have an option of doing everything in Malayalam also. And in the process, they don't know either English or Malayalam. So here we have to have an agreement. Probably we have to go by this of starting it at the inner level and moving on to a 3-language formula for which we need some kind of consensus. The third thing that we need is to decide on what is the extent of the private sector role in higher education. This is a very complicated matter in Kerala. It's astonishing because it is the private sector which is responsible for Kerala's education. In fact, the private-public partnership is at the heart of Kerala's education system. But people still think that it is government because the government pays the teachers and therefore private sector is not recognized. But unless the inputs for private sector inputs into education is at least 50%, there is really no way of our being able to reach the objective of having our 50% GER, which is being thought of. And the last one is internationalization. Here there is a bold recommendation that we must accept foreign universities to open campuses in India. There are already about 650 foreign organizations operating in India in one form or the other without proper recognition. They play roles in different sectors, and they are not legitimized, and therefore they are not able to play a significant role. But if the parliament wishes to bring in some foreign universities, first of all, we will have an experience of what has been done. Instead of reinventing the wheel, we can adopt the best practices that they have used. Secondly, they will offer some competition, as it happened in the banking industry, so that our education system also improves. But here again, there is no agreement you can see. So I expect that even though this is a very practical, very interesting, very innovative, very inventive suggestion, unless we have the agreements on these issues, it may be very difficult to implement it. So the test is in the eating of the pudding. So that is going to create problems. I'm very disappointed to see that the government is thinking of implementation in the next 10 years. That is too long. Another 10 years will be lost in our process of meeting the challenges of the 21st century. So I hope there will be faster acceptance and faster implementation in a way that the objectives are met without politicization, with an open mind and to be seen as a first step towards a revolutionary change in the education system in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Srinivasan, for the wonderful way in which you analyze the situation and also given the challenges before us. I would request the viewers, if they have any questions to Ambassador Srinivasan, you can ask them after all the panelists have spoken. Now I request Dr. Isaac Munjaria to give his remarks.
Thank you, and good evening to all of you, respected Dr. Alexander, Professor Philip, and my fellow panelists. It's a great opportunity to tell about the new education policy 2020. I'll be short. I would like to first tell that the 3 points which I consider the best in the policy. The first point is the flexibility. When I talk about flexibility, it is the choice of various courses, the exit policy, the use of technology, the credit transfer, and so on. See, for example, if I would like to, I am basically concentrating on the higher education scenario. If I would like to have a degree in computer science, a BTech degree in computer science, I can take a minor in music, a minor in Malayalam. So my varied interest will be taken care of by the flexible system. I can get out of the system maybe as the first year, second year, third year, or fourth year. But I wanted to tell you that it could have been better if instead of the year system, the policy also outlines an academic bank of credit. It should have been credit based. That means if I earn say 30 credits or 40 credits, I get a certificate. I get 60 credits, I get a diploma. I get 90, I get a bachelor's degree. And the more important flexibility which I bring in is the vocational education part or the skill part of it. In education, as we know, we have the knowledge, skill, and so the skill part is also taken care of. Probably if you look back, Kerala is one of the states which has started the vocational education way back in 1950s, I suppose, with the start of the junior technical schools, which has now been rechristened as the technical high schools, which imparts vocational education. But when it comes to this policy, every student has the opportunity to undergo a course in vocational education as per his choice or wish. So that flexibility is the most important one, and the use of technology, whether you want it to be in a brick and mortar university, or can you get this through open distance learning, or it could be a blended one with the ratio could vary, maybe 50% classroom learning, 50% online learning, and or it could vary 30, 70, 70, 30, or whatever may be the type of courses. It's possible to have that kind of a flexibility. So flexibility in time, flexibility in the choice of courses, and getting whatever you wanted, which can make you as a all-rounded a student who can get all kinds of knowledge, skills, and attitude. This is what I find the best part of the policy, which they say that this is going to be implemented through a curriculum and pedagogy, which is to reduce or minimize the rote learning and instead encourage a holistic development. The second point which I consider the best is the research component, which is being brought in with a financial assistance being provided by the National Research Foundation. So this, every teacher, though it envisages purely teaching colleges as well, teaching research colleges and things like that, but every person will have to become a researcher. Every teacher has to become a researcher. Then only we can confidently tell our students that what we practice, I mean, this is what we have found out. This is something. See, this is a COVID period. I mean, a few institutions only could come out with solutions to what the society needs. We have got to take care of the societal needs. The societal needs could not be fully taken care of the academic institutions in India. And if we can be geared to take up all the essential requirements of the society, see, especially the development of COVID vaccine and things like that, and the testing procedures and things like that. So I think that research, the focus which is being given to the research, and by making a change among the teachers to be a researcher, is the second point. The third point which I wanted to emphasize and which I consider to be the best one is the autonomy. The autonomy part is something which is going, I mean, that is a revolutionary thing, wherein every institution will become an autonomous institution. In granting, they will have the power to award the degrees. Today, we follow an affiliating system, which is one of the basic reasons why the quality of the education is not improving and nobody is made accountable. The teachers are not made accountable. The academic administrators are not made accountable. So I think by changing this, but this is something a great change. See, because all our Kerala, all the faculty associations will object to it, and they have been objecting to it. It's very difficult to introduce an autonomy system in Kerala. Maybe Tamil Nadu is the one where it has started very early. But you will find that there are about 40 to, I mean, say if we take 50,000 colleges, and we have about 1,000 universities today. This number, because autonomous colleges and what is envisaged is a minimum number of 3,000. Probably this number has to go up, and we have to envisage a campus with a minimum of 5,000 to 10,000 students. In that process, the number of colleges may come down from 50,000 to 10,000. This is going to be a major change which is going to happen. So these 3 points which I wanted to tell, that these are the best points of the policy. And then the the points which brings in a major change is on the regulatory system. We are going to have one regulator. See, probably the only point which I am little unhappy about it is that why this medical and the legal profession is excluded from the policy document. All others have been brought into, that's what I could understand from the whole document. The legal and the medical, it's going to be again separate. So you have got to, suppose you run a university, and if you want to run a medical college, Council of India. I'm not sure why that change has not been brought into the whole system. I mean, everything should have been under one umbrella, and since the MHRD has been renamed as the Ministry of Education, every education part should come as under one umbrella. So the one point which is emphasized is that by Mr. Srinivasan also, is that it's employment oriented. I slightly disagree with him, because this is for the holistic improvement by which you get an employment or not. That skill part also may get him into an employment, land up in an employment part of it. But education is, now I find that we are purely concentrating on to the employment one. In that process, what has happened recently is that more emphasis is being given to courses like we call it as emerging areas where data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all, or robotics and things like that. In this process, we are again making a factory model of education to produce identically programmed specimens. To produce identically programmed specimens, we should not achieve that. The whole document is for making everybody a creative person, so that we will have more people who will be innovative in their approach. They can really do research and then come out with innovative approaches which will help to improve the societal needs, which will improve the economic development of the country. So this is something which has to achieve, rather than making the student as an identically programmed specimen. This is a word which I thought is the best apt one, identically programmed specimen. Everybody is asked to write programs in Java. So, I mean, that is not the way the whole thing will have to undergo. So the whole process, if you want to get real implementation, this is a point which I wanted to tell you, is that I've been listening, or I've been experiencing most part of the schemes which has been listed or policy decisions as policy document. In this policy document, we have been trying for the last 10 years, and the progress is not that much. So a real change management is required to get this policy document onto the ground. Every point which I agree, I've been listening. I've been in Delhi in the IICT from 11 to 14. Most of the things have been proposed that time. Some of them, this graded autonomy has been implemented. So many points have been implemented. This technology, NPTEL, SWAYAM platforms, MOOC courses, all this have been implemented, but the implementation has not reached any stage for which we require a real change management. I think I'll stop with this, and this is my humble reactions to the whole national education policy. But as a whole, we have got to welcome the policy document, which should change the whole system of education to make every individual a creative person who can contribute to the societal needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kunchalia. I would now request Mr. Jayakumar to give his presentation.
Thank you, sir. It's nice to see all of you, Professor Philip and Kunchalia, Srinivasan sir, and Dr. Alexander, of course, and my old friend Hassan Ghafoor. It's nice to see it's an old man's club, I suppose. Everybody is known to each other so well, except that we are not in the vicinity. Now, having listened to Ambassador Srinivasan and Professor Kunchalia, I knew well when he was when we were vice chancellors together. He was in the Technical University, I was in Malayalam University. I'm not surprised by the views that he has expressed here, nor am I surprised by the views and the endorsements expressed by Sri T.P. Srinivasan sir. I understand their conviction. And having said this, I would like to take a middle position. Like it is normally said that you can always look at a half-filled glass and say that it is half-filled. I think people who have, panelists who have spoken before me have said that the glass is half-filled. Unfortunately, as a creative writer, I look at the empty part of the vessel. There are a lot of empty space. It is an empty space. So I will take a view, highly personal, of course, but informed by my experience, my personal experience in the field of education. I had been an education administrator in the state of Kerala for nearly 5 to 6 years as Director of Public Instruction, that is Director of School Education. I was also Secretary Higher Education for a brief while. Then I was Secretary School Education for nearly 5.5 years. I served as the Registrar of the MG University for 1 year. I also acted as Vice Chancellor MG University for nearly 9 months. Then I became finally Vice Chancellor of the Malayalam University. So it is my experiential knowledge about the education sector which makes me talk like this. Now, good things first. In 8 minutes or 10 minutes, I don't know what I'll be able to do, but I'll try to rush. The good things from the intimidating 465 pages of the draft policy when it was circulated a year ago, it's an improvement because it is 64 pages, readable. Readable. 464 pages is a document which is meant not to be read. Now, from that, it's a welcome change that the document is a readable 64 pages, and we have most of us have read it. It's an ambitious document, no doubt. It has a vision of its own. It has a vision how education has to be overall in this country and how it should look like in the next 10 years or 15 years. And some of the suggestions are indeed very bold. Bolder than what Yashpal had suggested, bolder than what Kothari had suggested, bolder than the 1986 education policy, and bolder than perhaps many of these recommendations made by committees and commissions so far. There have been many. Some of the suggestions are welcome. For example, 4-year courses, 4-year integrated B.Ed courses is good. Bringing ECC, early childhood education, into the mainstream of the school education has its plus and minuses, especially from the implementation side. The policy also addresses the exam phobia and says that don't worry about exams. Exams will be very sort of easy. It explicitly says that exams will be easy. Very good. At least in Bihar and UP, people don't have to give slips and do all these ingenious things to make the people pass, students pass. Anyway, so exam phobia is being addressed. Then, as Srinivasan sir said, the language policy, it could create a bit of a confusion here and there, but I think the drafters of the people who have drafted the policy are cleverer than all of us. They have said that the mother tongue should be the medium of instruction in the primary classes up to class 3 or 5. But they have added a clause, as far as possible. So that is good enough. You create something and you dig a hole into it. Through this whole of as far as possible, this implementation, we know the fate of this recommendation. Now, on the one hand, it says mother tongue is very good, but implement it as far as possible. We know what is as far as possible means, because LKG, UKG English education, the charge is around 50,000 rupees for admission into an LKG class where you will be taught by incompetent teacher bad English. Your student will be spoiled forever. His language capacity is guaranteed to be spoiled because it is being taught in the most unscientific manner. But people are suckers, they'll go and pay 50,000 rupees, 1 lakh of rupees, English medium, LKG, UKG. So anyway, I don't want to go into that because that is an area of my sensitivity. Now, language policy, theoretically, it is very good. And the kind of flexibility, the kind of differentiation in the vocational areas, then the kind of flexibility given in choice of subjects, all these things are very good. And internationalization is very good. All these things, I cannot disagree with them. But my only problem is, where I take a U-turn is, these are all good vision, but these are not necessarily the solutions to the problems that Indian education encounters. That is all my problem, simple. Cut short a long narration, I would say that even while I find these recommendations wonderful, these recommendations are not, unfortunately, solutions to the problems of Indian education. Indian education is confined, I'll confine to the school education sector to begin, as we have a constraint of time. You see, the school education sector in India have been a dismal failure, we should understand. The state has failed. In spite of the fact that Constitution says it is the august duty of the state to provide free and compulsory education to the students up to age 16 or whatever it is, the state has failed miserably. In fact, I was reading a book where I came across this particular incident where in 1992, I suppose, when the present defense minister was the then chief minister of or education minister of Uttar Pradesh, he brought in an act called the Anti-Copying Act of 1992. He implemented it. Rajnath Singh implemented it, and the pass percentage of class 10 plummeted to 14% from glorious 95%. In Kerala also we have 100% pass in SSLC. Now, after this Anti-Copying Act, this is a recorded thing. The pass percentage was 14%. Now, Mr. Mulayam Singh and Mayawati in the next election said that if we come to power, we should scrap this act, Anti-Copying Act, or indirectly saying that we shall allow people to copy. And Mulayam Singh came to power, and the first thing he did, As soon as he drove from the Raj Bhavan to the Secretariat, was to issue an ordinance scrapping the Anti-Copying Act, thereby giving clearance to go and copy merrily. Go and copy merrily. This is the kind of thing. A few years ago, we have seen how parents have been climbing using a ladder into the first floor or second floor of the examination hall in order to help the students copy, you know. This is the kind of education scenario we are in. I had the good fortune of accompanying some of these missions under DPEP and Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. I had been to states like West Bengal and Orissa and Uttar Pradesh, and I have seen how the schools work. We have teacher absenteeism is the worst. Quality of education is the worst. So it is in this, despite spending huge amounts of money borrowed from World Bank for DPEP or Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan or Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan or the STARS program that is being implemented, tons of money is being borrowed, but we have not been able to succeed. Now, is the solution throwing the baby with the bathwater and saying that, okay, private sector come and take it off? Is the private sector going to address these worrisome and incorrigibly difficult situation? Is the private sector interested in going to run a school for the slum children in Bihar and UP? I'm sure you are much more intelligent than that. But the state has failed. At the same time, the state need not fail. We have experiments where the states have succeeded. Look at the Naval.
Is it our problem? I don't think it's our problem.
It is some kind of a disturbance has come. I think Jayakumar says internet connectivity issues, because others are all okay. He seems to be frozen, so I think.
Wait for half a minute.
Okay, sir. Okay.
We are giving flexibility, no silos. We'll have flexibility. At the same time, there is too much of concentration and centralization. In a country as great as India, centralization of education is going to be the end of education. Earlier, this was a state subject. It was in 1977 or something. This was brought to the concurrent. I am afraid this will go on to the central list shortly, if this is the tendency. UGC and AICT, all these institutions who have acquired enormous amount of knowledge about Indian education system have been summarily dispensed with. And new institutions are being created. Whether they will address the faults of the earlier institutions, we do not know. Why do
I think there seems to be some internet connectivity issues again.
He can come back perhaps.
Yeah, sure.
We'll wait for half a minute and then move on to Gafur. Then he can come back.
He can come back. Shall we move on to the next speaker?
He is talking, that's the problem.
Huh?
He's actually...
He's speaking.
He's speaking, but then we cannot hear, sir, I think.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
We can't hear, but then I think there is an internet connectivity issue, but probably he also, he got disconnected right now. So I think, Alexander, sir, we can move to the...
Can we go to the next speaker?
Yes, sir. I will probably contact him over phone and see.
So that he can come back.
Yes, sir. Yes.
He can be the last now.
He can be the last.
So he can sum it up.
I would request Dr. Gafur.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are
very
audible.
well, very well.
You are audible and you are
Dr. Alexander, Dr. Kunjaria, Professor Srinivasan. I don't know whether he's a professor. I know him quite well, but still, okay. And of course, Mr. Jayakumar, all of them are IAS, IFS officers. And I think to be the only person who is on the ground. So I run institutions. So I know all the problems right down from the Montessori to the medical college. So I will just take a practical look at things. And most of the time, I think I am in agreement with Mr. Jayakumar, as he was also in the practical area of that, in various, from school to university. Now I'll start from the top. किताबों में छपते हैं चाहत के किस्से, हकीकत की दुनिया में चाहत नहीं है, which is Zahir's poetry. He says किताबों में छपते हैं चाहत के किस्से, which means in books you can read all sort of romantic things, but in the world of reality there is no romance. Okay, so the point with this document is that it is very romantic. We agree to that. And also, as already somebody said, Malayalis are going to disagree. That's also a factor. The reason why we are disagreeing is that our system is different. It is basically, it is called an aided system, whereby the salary is paid by the government and 80% of the students are admitted purely on merit without fees in most of the colleges and schools till recently. That's what I'm going to tell you. So recently there has been a change. But the entire older generation, including me, belong to that system, where merit was the sole criteria. This is the issue. So first question I would like is that put forward is regarding the medical education. They have said that they are going to mix up Ayurveda, naturopathy, etc. in the curriculum of modern education. And the entire medical faculty, fraternity is against it. They are against it. And surprisingly, all the groups are against it. You can't mix up Ayurveda with the medicine. Maybe Ayurveda is superior. We're not saying it's inferior, but you can't mix up both. So they are saying they're going to mix up both. Now, how will they mix up? If they mix up, then that means that the curriculum will have to be extended. Course will have to be extended. Already it's a very tedious course. And how do you do that? Next, already we have this fallacy called NEET, where a student from Kerala has to go to Assam and study, and the Assamese student has to come to Tamil Nadu and study. So it is high time that should be scrapped. Let the students get NEET only, let them write the NEET examination, but let them study in the hometown. I'm telling you now this matter because in this COVID time, now we see the difficulty. A student from here has to go to and study in Kashmir unnecessarily. When Kashmir has got umpteen medical colleges, then Assam has got umpteen medical. Tamil Nadu has got, simply they are pushing around. Just mentioned it. Nothing is mentioned about that. Now we are coming to the RT, that is the right to education. I totally agree with the document which says that the RT should be extended up to 18. 18 years. I don't know who came out with this idea of 14 years, because 14 years means you are left stranded in school at 9th standard. Nobody is going to pay for you. But here in this document, it is not mentioned what percentage of students will be given. See, right to education means I should be given the right to study free. That is not mentioned. And who is going to pay for it? That is not mentioned. Then regarding the GDP, we all welcome this. That is what I said already about hakikat ke duniya mein nahi hai. Because for the past 30 years, we were saying GDP is to be increased to 6%, and we remained at 1%. Regarding the 4-year degree exit courses and all, exit at 1 year, exit, all agreeable. That is the only thing is that now we are come, because I'll tell you, because you can finish this ITC at 1 year, Polytechnic at 2 years, and probably engineering degree at 4 years. That is fine. We don't have any problem regarding that. Now our issue is that regarding this preschool. I am totally in agreement regarding the preschool. I'll tell you why. Nowadays, the children are being sent into religious schools for doing preschool. It's a very, very bad sort of situation, especially that is occurring in Kerala, where religious instruction is being given in preschool. I don't know what they're going to learn in preschool as far as the religious instruction is concerned. So that point we agree, but we disagree with the cluster school issue. I'll tell you why. How can a private school exchange its facilities, or not exchange, give its facilities to a public school, or public school give it to a private school? For example, all these are not practical. Even private to private is not practical, because each private school has got its own different standard. You can't say that you are letting everything free, and then you start imposing conditions like this. Now, another important thing. We are speaking about autonomous. Now, I'll tell you why Kerala is objecting to that. We have got 24 medical colleges. And I have been a member of the Medical Council of India. I have been a member of the Kerala Health University Governing Council also. The situation there is atrocious. You give autonomy to them, they'll cook up their cells, they'll cook up the admission, they'll have ghost faculty. The professors will be sitting at home. They won't come to teach. They won't come even on internet. You pay them a retainer, they will remain there. So how do you give autonomy? So there should be a controlling authority. Now the controlling authority was the affiliating university. So if the affiliating university had 500 colleges, you reduce it, make it 50 colleges, but you should have some sort of, you can't give autonomy in India. I'm telling you, Mr. Jayakumar has already said about what happened in Uttar Pradesh, what happened in Bihar. He was mentioning Bihar, where the parents were climbing this thing and giving chits to the students. Then, major issue here. If you make it autonomous, what will happen to the reservation policy? You have a reservation policy. What will happen to the reservation policy? Because you don't have private sector, you don't have reservation. Second thing, what about the 50-50 policy which was there in the Unnikrishnan judgment, where 50% of the seats were given to brilliant students? Of course, the court has struck it down, but this policy says that we will be giving, they are saying the other way around. Managements will be given, a percentage will be taken over by the governments, and managements will be given this percentage. Already it has been struck down by the Supreme Court as a cross subsidy. Already the Supreme Court has said you can't take money from one student and then try to teach another student free. So this is a major issue which has created so much of problems, including the NEET examination, and eventually the 50-50 policy has gone down. So this is one more issue. A few more issues. I'm going quite fast. Then there's the issue of funding. We had the UGC funding there. UGC funding was given to the government and government-aided colleges only. Then they went to RUSA. Now RUSA is planning to give it to the private sector also. Now you are speaking about philanthropists. What should I say? I would like the august panel over here to tell me who is a philanthropic fellow. At least in Karnataka, not a single fellow is philanthropic. All those are money-making institutions run by politicians. Now you are going to give them autonomy. This is the issue. So philanthropy has gone out of the window. Improvement of grades, totally in agreement. Similarly, top 100 universities you bring, Yale, Harvard, Stanford you bring, we are fine. Research model, we have a problem. Now, sanctioning research should not be left to the central government because we have got local issues. So the local issue, if the candidate sends this as a paper, this thing for PhD, they may reject it. So that should be left to the local this thing, because nowadays they are doing fine. As well as, of course, there should be a regulatory body over there. Then finally, I am coming to the final, because I didn't want to go on criticizing. But however, I have a feeling regarding this 3-language formula. Now, my objection is a very funny objection. In North India, you have 2 Indo-European languages. You take English, then you take Bhojpuri and you take Hindi. Both have got the same script. Both are the same. Instead of Kitna, they'll say Kaito. So what is the difference between these things? But in South India, what is going to happen is that we have to study even Dravidian language. Then we have to study an Indo-European language. Then we have to study, of course, English. So this is not fair. The same thing will occur if you use Sanskrit also. You take Hindi and Sanskrit. You take Hindi and Urdu. It is all the same. It is all dialects. So that is not correct. So if you want to implement a 3-language formula, let there be an Indo-European language. Let there be English, and let there be a Dravidian language. That's why I said it's got a funny argument. Then final thing is that all said and done, you're speaking about top 100 universities coming here. Then you're saying that all the students are being taught in the mother tongue. We are all for the mother tongue. But with the mother tongue, English also should be taught. If you're thinking about globalization, you're thinking about 100 universities coming over here, and you're thinking of so many other things, international, then where is the question of leaving English lagging behind and starting off at some other era? So not possible at all. So you have a 2-language formula with English, then you add a 3rd language, let's say in the 8th standard. This is my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ghafoor. Now we have the last speaker in our panel, Professor Philip. I would request him to come and give his presentation.
Last, one more.
Yes.
Jay Kumar.
The last Jay Kumar was to complete.
Yes. That could be back. Yes. Yeah. So, moderator sir, Alexander sir, fellow panelists and viewers, Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are.
Hold on. I had some points made and I found most of them have been covered. So I'm wondering where to start. So I decided I'll start with the first point which the chairman moderator made, starting with a child. Very good thing, child. But I asked this question in 2-3 years' time. 70% of the children of 3 years and 4 years and 5 years will be in Anganwadis. In other words, our future generation will be prepared, developed, molded by Anganwadis. So my first concern was, is that the right forum for the future generation to be shaped? The expression that he used about Anganwadi is Anganwadi workers. Anganwadi workers are the ones who are going to develop this future generation. Now, so instead of compelling everybody, now mostly these are people who are from the low stratum, why don't you say you have the freedom to go to an Anganwadi or to a private school? And here is a fees stamp. So if you are not happy with Anganwadi, join a private school. But please don't compel, because my mind, we are pushing down the new generation by sending them to these schools which are not all that well prepared or run by competent staff. The second point I thought I'll touch was on language. The 2014 judgment of the Supreme Court on the Karnataka and private sector battle, the Supreme Court has said parent is the decider of the language. So as far as I see it, it is settled. It is not, as Mr. Jayakumar said, as far as possible. It is a settled issue that the parent will decide whether it's English or Malayalam or Tamil or Sanskrit or whatever. So that part is a settled one. I don't know why we raised it again, because there is some reaction in Karnataka. In yesterday's newspaper, talking about 2-language formula, why we should follow 3-language formula. Okay, so that was anyway settled issue. Now, third one, when I looked at that, is vocationalization. Great idea. We are far, far behind when we look at, and I visited Germany years ago. One of the things I did was to visit some of these vocational schools, fantastic schools. And when we say the German miracle, it starts from there, the vocational school. And we are quite behind the Finland or Singapore or England or whichever. So it's a beautiful move, a revolutionary move. But then my question is, should it start in the middle class, which means the 6th standard? That's not practiced anywhere. I looked at the ages. It is usually with the teens, something like 13 years, which would mean, ask Rangarajan. What is his name? Kasturirangan's report talks about 9th standard onwards. So I think that would be the right thing. 9, 10, 11, 12, 4 years. And that 4 years will be good enough and the right time for a child to decide which vocation to take. So that is another issue which I looked at and I thought needs perhaps a correction when the implementation comes. Another issue which crossed my mind was, which has a great, one of the finest points in the document, was dealing with affiliation. Now, affiliation has sat too long for any political staff. So therefore, this committee's recommendation and the policy document statement that we will do away with affiliation is one of the greatest things that happened. It has done a lot of damage. Now, well, but then the document says we have 15 years for this to come about. So I started wondering, why do we need 15 years? Now it can start from next year or year after next at least. We have a large number of autonomous colleges, which the UGC has declared or government has declared, institutions with the potential for excellence, number of them. Now straight away declare them as universities. or degree granting institutions. They're already waiting to be called. So to my mind, as Mr. Srinivasan has said, there is no need to wait for 15 years for these kinds of things. It can start 2 years from now, easy. And look at this point. I think the Pitroda Commission, as well as this commission, I think talks about 15,000 universities. Yes, there is scope for 15 or even 20,000 universities. Multidisciplinary, of course. And these colleges which are now affiliated, for example, when I look at here in Bangalore, visit here in Bangalore, St. Joseph's College emerging as a university. It would be a great thing to happen. Or in Trivandrum, the MG College or Ivanis College, developing as a university. It's a great, great revolution to happen. But then, there is a proviso. Would they have the autonomy which we are looking for? Now, when I look at the control system which is coming, I must say that when I read this document, I read through Kothari's commission downward, Pitroda's, Yashpal report, and even the 1986, of course, 86 we debated very big. Now, this is one of the most beautiful written documents. It's very exciting to read through. Concepts are very good. Outcomes are very well. But when I came to the control system, I began to think, as the Indian mind came back again, we are so used to control system. For example, the most important agency for control, National Higher Education Regulatory Council. All the liberalization talked about, all the devolution talked about, we came with finally with this expression, Education Regulatory Council. Why do we need a regulation anymore? Now, you would see when you read through this, you will see a lot of, I would say, American liberalism in this. I thought it was very, very good. American universities have beaten European universities. Absolutely, hollow. The reason was they're independent, they are autonomous, they have freedom. No federal government sits over them. No state government sits over them. Freedom. And when I read this and the definition of the regulation, I said, we are back again. I thought that was a backward step that was taken. I would request, I hope, that people who are implementing this issue will look at this and say, redefine the role of this regulatory authority and even take away that expression regulation. That's one of the important points that got to my mind. In the implementation, one of the very most important pieces for the real instrumentality is the teacher. Now, this document, as well as Kasturirangan report, mentions about the very critical role that they play and the mental revolution, that's or the cultural revolution that's expected to happen. But I'm really worried would that happen. Now, what is our system here? Pay and promotion increases with longevity. That's it. You end up, particularly the government paying the salary. From the management point of view, when I look at that, I say, okay, some college, let's say MG College of Trivandrum, the principal has the responsibility to run it, accountability to perform, accountability to deliver goods. But the key instrumentality is the teacher. Who pays him? The government pays him. And what is the control that he has when chips are down? Not much. In other words, you have a system where you have the accountability, but you don't have the authority. Now, this is something which has been looked at. I remember saying this in one of the meetings where Ambassador Srinivasan was present. So this is an unworkable system. And this has to be looked at. Finally, when we look through this, we see that the public sector, private sector emerges. And private sector is not painted all that very brightly. But if we let's take example, the secondary schools and colleges, arts and sciences colleges. Who performs better? way ahead, whether it's Kerala or Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or anywhere, way ahead. Now it's a private sector. One of the most admired pundits in management, Peter Drucker, had a comment on this. Now he said, we now understand why there are some things government by its very essence cannot do. A government activity can work only if it is a monopoly. It cannot function if there are other ways to do the job, that is, if there is competition. Whatever non-governmental organizations can do better or can do just as well should not be done by government at all. Now, whenever I say this, I hear from my colleagues, oh, I look at IIMs and IITs. And I argue the other way, and I said, that proves my point. IIMs or IITs are founded by government, funded by government, that's the end. The director and the faculty have total freedom. I managed an IIM for almost 6 years, 5 years and 9 months. The minister never called me once to Delhi. The secretary never asked me to go to Delhi and meet him, never. The director and the faculty are the institution. So the IIMs and IITs have proved, interesting again, the IIMs and IITs are foreign models. For example, Harvard came to IIM Ahmedabad, MIT came to IIM Calcutta, and when we started IIT Madras, we have the Germans helping us, IIT Kanpur, the American helping us. So that's which we had models, clear models. And so that is what was inherited in IIMs and IITs. So the point that I'm making is we can do all the kind of things. If we don't give these institutions autonomy, real freedom, real universities will not emerge. All that we talk about will never happen. We'll be back again. We call it the wine in this old bottle or new bottle. Yeah, old wine, new bottle kind of thing can happen. So I would say to my colleagues, please read through carefully and look at some of the things that are falling in between the lines and ask a question when it comes to this key issue, have we departed at all? Have we made any progress? That's my key one. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Philip. Now, I think Mr. Jayakumar is back. Can I invite?
I have said my piece, except that I didn't wind it up. I have explained my position. I have only, but at the time of,
I think there is again a network issue, sir.
There is some problem.
Some connectivity issues there, sir.
So you know what it means, online teaching. Online teaching issues.
Madam, they can come with only one.
I think come with voice. Jayakumar?
we can go on to discussions.
Yes. No, please carry on. We are not finished.
No, I only said that this policy's problem is it is not realistic about the hardcore realities of especially backward states. If I may use a very wrong word, I think it will create elitism in education. This facilitates elitism in education, which is good in a way. Elite education is also good, so long as the groundwork is also addressed. That part is neglected. That part is neglected with a very poor role for the states and the local bodies and all that. The qualitative aspect of school education will not be addressed by this policy. That's what I'm saying. It has a lot of other good things. It is trying to bring in more of international expertise and create a new education superstructure for the 21st century. As the policy itself says, it is addressing the aspirations of the 21st century. To that extent, yes. But in that process, large percentage of the unfortunate population of this country will be hived off from the benefits of education. In any case, we could argue that they do not get any kind of benefit even today. Even after they pass class 10, they are as good as illiterate. but that problem remains there. It has not been addressed. That is all I have to say. This policy has certain good things, but a substantial issue of quality, retention, access, all these things are left vague in the policy. That is mainly my objection. I participated in a discussion today where I spoke for 1 hour. So therefore, it is better that I stop here because I might elaborate. So I think I have said what basically I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jayakumar. Ranjana, how about questions from the...
Yes, sir. There are certain questions, there are a lot of questions actually coming in. So what I'm trying to do is I'm just clubbing up certain questions. And in fact, one question which was to Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan sir was, sir, how do you find, how soon can the implementation of this national education policy be? Or how do you think the implementation of the national education policy can be in all the states? Is one question which is directed to Ambassador sir. Sir, please. Sir, you're on mute, sir. Can you just unmute?
Ambassador Srinivasan, you heard the question?
Sir, you're still on mute. You need to unmute, sir. No, sir. You're not audible.
Mute. Okay, now maybe.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, I've been pressing that for a long time. Yeah.
Okay.
No, the government has suggested about 15 years for full implementation. I think that is too long. We cannot afford that. But then you cannot implement everything in a hurry also. So I think we have to do step by step. Brick by brick approach is what I would suggest. There are certain things which are low-hanging fruits, as people say. So those could be implemented very soon. And that is probably the 4-year graduation system. There could be the research aspect. Then there could be more autonomy. Already there are autonomous institutions. But all this can be done. But the problem of the practitioners, I'm not a practitioner, I'm an accidental educationist. So I seem to cut through things while the others see all kinds of ghosts. This is the real problem. I don't see these ghosts. But see, they have that experience and they feel that people will react in a particular way. And that's a matter of mindset. So how soon can we change the mindset is the issue. And that may not be very soon, I understand. But if you experiment with that and then try to build on it, it will be possible. Like, for example, we introduced 20 autonomous colleges in Kerala, which was very controversial. People just, opposed it tooth and nail, literally with tooth and nail. They even attacked me on that. But today, the same people are now giving autonomy to engineering colleges without any explanation. We talked about, academic city and education zones. They rejected it completely. They boycotted a conference because we proposed that. And now they have set up a committee to implement it. So we have this slow pace. We reject everything initially, but once you see some merits in it, we have also the capacity to adjust ourselves to that. So that is my hope, that we can do this faster than that is expected, that is announced. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, there is another question which is specifically to Kunjariya Isaac, sir. The question is since you have mentioned about the researchers, the question from the audience is, won't it provide a chance for the teachers to downplay teaching and dedicate more time to research? And do you think, what do you think is the effective way of implementation of national education policy to prevent this?
I don't think a teacher should go away from teaching to do research. This has to be, any teacher should have 3-4 things he has to do. One is teaching, the second is research, the third is consultancy, and the fourth is social activities. All these 4 he has to set apart time for this. If we are not used to it, certain people are, you cannot go by one person who is selfish to do only research to improve his CV. There are people like that. We cannot, everybody I cannot say that the whole country, all people should be alike. But if you take the position in the national institutes where more importance is given for, teaching as well research, research is also given importance. So I don't find any kind of thing, because the person who does research will be able to explain the concepts better to the students than a person who has never done it, who has taken the thing and learned it from the book. So anybody who practices, that is, you can ask Dr. Faisal Ghafoor, they are all practicing professionals. No? So how is that helps? No? They teach as well, they practice. The medical profession is that way. So we have got to have that kind of a thing. Either you should practice, you should be practicing, or you should be doing research. So then you will become a successful person as a teacher, which has been proved all throughout the world by leading universities. So I think, but the implementation of this, converting all the teachers to researchers, may take a time. So that is why probably it may take more time than anticipated. So, but I would say from my experience in Hindustan and Kerala, I would say the universities are the universities as a whole are trying to give more input to research, but what they lack is funding, and that is to happen from the National Research Fund, which is being created. So that's
While on the topic of research,
Yes,
let me add one point. All this idea about research is wonderful, but the policy also says that you will not have the freedom to do the research. The Research Council of India will decide on what topic you should research. I think this takes away the whole charm of research. If a centralized body is going to tell you what to research on, then where are we? Where is the intellectual freedom? I'm sorry, I'll just stop at that.
No, that is right. It should have the research. I mean, that freedom should be given to you, and unless it is a national, project or something. Yeah. It should not be like that.
Yeah. Will other panelists also would like to add on to the research topic now that we are on the topic of research? Professor Philip, Dr. Ghafoor, would you like to add on to the topic of the research which is being discussed here?
Dr. Ghafoor.
One thing, already the UGC had, already they have passed that for anybody to be promoted from assistant professor onwards, they should have a PhD. So now it is almost mandatory in our colleges and all that the teacher should have had at least now 3 years experience in research. So most of them are getting, a lot of them are getting PhDs now. So I think that would be better. You can't make all these people, see, for example, you can't make me do teaching, then see patients from morning to evening, and then do research also. But for me to be promoted, see, I am professor of neurology over there. So for me to be promoted from associate professor to professor, they have put the publication of papers as mandatory. There it is different. PhD is mandatory. For us, that is not mandatory because we have got a post-MD degree. There is DM. So we are exempted from that. So this it is already in the setup already.
Okay, thank you, sir. There is again, yes, sir, Professor Philip.
One comment. I think a teacher can only be a good teacher if he is backed by research. That strengthens him. And therefore, that is a must. That's one. Number two, that's the way in which he improves, heightens his scholarliness. That's two. Three, now the student get benefited more. Bring in reality from outside the classroom is a must. Only happens through research. So this is, as I see it, is not for promotion or appointment. If you want to be a good teacher, effective teacher, a developmental teacher, then this is a must and that should become part of the culture. This is where we lost out. Now, in our colleges and universities, we have it built. Now, that kind of pressure was not there ever. That pressure in America, they have publish or perish. That was the slogan years ago. Now, we did not have any such slogan or did not have anything of that kind, resulting in most colleges have become teaching shops. That's it. That has to change.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, sir.
Yes, Srinivas.
Is my mic on? Is my mic on? Can you
Yes,
hear
sir.
me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
You're audible.
Okay, there is another dimension to research which I have noticed in American universities, which is entrepreneurship. I know a professor in Stanford who is from Kerala. He has 81 companies which he started with his students, and that's a dramatic, accomplishment in the sense through studies, through research, then he goes into entrepreneurship with that student, and therefore establishes companies. And that is how it should. And it should lead to patents, it should lead to even Nobel Prizes. That is ultimate in research as it can be developed. But we haven't had a Nobel Prize for 100 years, so we don't need to focus on that as yet. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So there is another question. Again, this is something which Jayagopal sir had actually mentioned in his presentation. Won't it create a divide between the privileged and the underprivileged? So the panelists' view on that is something which the audience would like to know. There are a couple of questions on that. So may I request the panelists to talk on the same? We can probably start with Fasal Ghafoor, sir.
No, madam, I have already expressed my reservations on this. On the issue of reservation for the poor, reservation for the OBC. I don't group. But what I meant is that the underprivileged groups, there should be reservation. That is not inbuilt in this document.
So that is what the question is. So can the panelists express their opinion? Yes, Srinivasan, sir.
Mr. Jayakumar himself said that elitism may be in a sense may be good, in the sense that if you have a higher level of education and elitist accomplishments, then the others can also grow in that direction. So there is one way is either to pull everybody down to the lower level or push everybody up. In the Soviet Union, everybody was called a Tavarish. Everybody was brought down. But in Poland, everybody was called a lord. So either you can bring everybody to the lower level or everybody to the higher level. And I would prefer the latter, because when you have an elitist group doing well, it will only percolate down and you will have some benefit. So there is nothing wrong in having an elitist system. We don't have a socialist system anyway. So this is not a bad thing altogether.
Thank you. And we have many questions coming in. Because of the interest of time, I'll take one last question, which is on the single regulator system. So the audience would like to know the comments of the panelists on the single regulatory system that has been proposed by the NEP. Can I have Professor Philip talking about the single regulator system?
Yes, I have used the word gargantuan. When you look at this new controlling body, whatever name you give it, Education Council. Now the Higher Education Council, bringing every college other than medical and legal out. Now I think that's going to be an unprecedented. And now all of us know the way in which UGC suffered because of number. AICT again suffered because of number. Now you are building up now a huge mammoth organization to regulate, to oversee. What are the things that are doing? All kinds of things, standards, funding, accreditation, and regulation. All four rolled into one. Now, is it possible? Now, we all learned in management that you progress by specialization. As I think Dr. Ghafoor or somebody has mentioned, well, we have the wisdom, AICT has the wisdom of education. Now, All India Board of Management Studies have the wisdom of management schools. Medical Council has the wisdom of medical education. Why are we now bringing all these back and put it together into one piece in this country to manage this huge number of institutions? In fact, in one of my, I said, if I were to recommend, I'll say keep UGC but cut it into 4. UGC North, South, West, and East. They cannot manage from Delhi. Let AICT remain, Medical Council remain, and every such body which was there, even the NAC, all that thing can remain. What is needed is loosening.
Correct.
And please also have some faith in the market. I written somewhere, Adam Smith's that invisible hand is a powerful hand. I can tell you, there is a time when there was corruption in management education admissions. Engineering college, there was corruption. As it all come down, the reason being there is competition. There is enough of supply. So if I don't think that college is good enough, I don't have to join. Why should I pay a capitation fee? Therefore, we must also have some faith in the market, which we lost out in the last 50 years of socialism. So, summing up, I'd say that this one body regulating the whole education system, except medical and legal, is rather unhelpful.
May I make a point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, in fact, if you read it, the next sentence says, it mentions all these bodies and they say they will all be part of the system. In the sense, in actual practice, NAC and ASTC and everything will be there. But they will be just components of the huge system. That's the only difference. In practice, I don't think it is going to make a big difference. They will keep a control over everything nominally because Prime Minister is the chairman of this body. But in actual effect, all these bodies will continue to function. That's what I think.
My whole approach was take away this control. So please look at the definition of a university, a good definition. In a university, and I spent time with IIM, I know for certain what it meant to be free, what autonomous, that you can work. And therefore, why do we keep talking about controls? And I'm sure the market itself will regulate if we give the freedom. Even in Karnataka, it's about Gafur Saab mentioned about Karnataka. You look at these private universities, many of them are working so beautifully well. Manipal University, M. Ramaiah University, and many others, beautifully well, in fact, I would even say better than public universities. So we have examples here in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu of this because of freedom that we got as university. Going back again to why not be having legal and medical can be on their own? Why not engineering? Just one because we have gone through that. There is a body with developed experience, expertise, and affection and love for that area. Why do that? So I would say that what is needed is instead of centralization, devolution is what is needed. Centralization is what is needed.
Because in the preface of the report, it says excessive regulation is one of the problems to be tackled. That's what they say in the beginning. So how can they be doing something against that? So that is why I said in actual practice, it would not be so centralized as it appears to be.
Yes, thank you, sir.
You may be right.
Thank you, sir. Would other panelists would like to express their opinion on this? Isaac Kunjaria, sir.
I think, see, the regulatory part has to come down. That is the only way to make it more competitive. But the accreditation part has to be strengthened.
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
That is, reduce the regulatory power and improve the accreditation part of it, which will really make the system function by itself, get it corrected by itself. I think the whole thing, see, I have already told my problem with the document is that how we are going to get this implemented. See, from my experience with Delhi, I tell you that the whole thing may not have much change in practice. All these things
they are a
will
stubborn
remain.
species. Human beings are a stubborn species.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for those opinion and valuable inputs which has been given. I think let us hope that we have the so-called changes which is mentioned in the document, the positive, negatives. I'm sure the audience out there, we have around 400 plus audience out there who are listening. We have people from distinguished faculty members. We have people from the media. We have people from students from all sorts, like I would say from India as well as from abroad, because there are some questions which have come from abroad as well. So let me call upon the respected moderator to say the last word and to close this panel discussion. Over to you, Alexander, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I must say this was a very interesting discussion. I thank all the panelists for giving their opinion on this matter. But on the whole, we all agree that education is in the concurrent list of the Constitution. And for effective implementation, the involvement of all the states are also involved. And therefore, I'm sure this kind of a discussion will be helpful for the Government of India in finally arriving at a machinery for control and implementation of this policy. But we must take it as a roadmap, a vision statement, which has tried to identify the issues on the ground, identify the challenges, and the direction in which we should move so that education can be made as an instrument of social development, individual empowerment, and economic progress. I am sure that the discussions that we have initiated will continue, and more people, stakeholders, will be involved in the discussions and help the Government of India and the state governments to come to a practical way of implementing this. Thank you very much indeed. Special thanks for all the panelists. And I appreciate the presence of all the viewers in this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Ranjana, for coordinating it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you.